Planetary Extinction Article Part 2. Thanks to Black Bear News for making the link to this article available. A recent report from Yale 360 argued that the current system of rating hurricanes needs to be scrapped, because it fails to account for how climate change-augmented hurricanes are now carrying far more powerful storm surges, often moving slower, and bringing flooding from rainfall that the current system cannot account for. If all of this information makes you feel despair, you are not alone. Another recent study warned of catastrophic mental health changes that are tied to climate change, including high levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. Water. As usual, climate change-induced disruptions are glaringly apparent in the watery realms of Earth. A massive iceberg is now poised to break off Antarctica's Pine Island Glacier. The iceberg is notably larger than the one that broke off the same glacier a year ago, which was 4.5 times the size of Manhattan. In the US, given how many millions of people live in coastal flooding zones, with more looking to move to the coast, no one is required to even tell you if your future home is likely to flood. According to a recent study by the Natural Resources Defense Council and Sabin Center for Climate Law, in 21 U.S. states there are no statutory or regulatory requirements for a seller to disclose a property's flood risks or past flood damages. The other 29 states have varying degrees of requirements to disclose this information. In the low-lying coastal nation of Bangladesh, an entire country already beset by regular flooding, there is now an ongoing rural exodus into cities that is literally reshaping the country. With 163 million people, Bangladesh is the world's most populous delta. There, riverbank erosion alone displaces between 50,000 to 200,000 people annually, and the capital city of Dhaka is absorbing between 300,000 to 400,000 people, mostly climate migrants, each year. On the other side of the spectrum of climate change-induced water disasters is drought. In the U.S., a crisis at Lake Powell, between Utah and Arizona, is looming as the ongoing long-term drought impacts plaguing the Southwest are reaching farther and farther upstream. Water rationing has reached far upriver as places in Colorado have had to ration water due to diminishing snowpacks and the ongoing drought. In New Mexico, water reservoirs are nearing bottom as they have been used to help people survive the record drought of 2018, but now they are nearly dry, prompting worries about how to deal with the future, for which only increasing widespread drought is predicted. For example, by late September, the largest reservoir in the state was at only 3% capacity. Down in Australia, an ongoing drought is hotter and drier than anything people in the impacted areas have ever known, and it is getting worse. It's quite unusual to get over 40 C here, but this last summer and the last couple of summers have been so scorchingly hot, a sheep farmer there told The Guardian. You can see the water being sucked out of the dams, sucked out of the soil, sucked out of my life, and you can't plan for that. Fire. After another summer of rampant wildfires across the U.S. West, several continue to burn well into the fall. Since my last dispatch, a Wyoming wildfire forced evacuations from hundreds of homes and forced the closure of a highway south of Jackson. By mid-September the wildfire had scorched at least 40,000 acres. At the time of this writing, wildfires continued to burn in Oregon, Idaho, Washington, Colorado, Utah, and Nevada. A recent report discussed how wildfire tornadoes, record sizes, and temperatures of wildfires, and other seeming anomalies will become phenomena we can expect regularly going into the future, thanks to climate change. Air. Record-breaking warm temperatures beset Anchorage, Alaska, in September, along with unusually dry weather. Of the record-breaking high temperatures there, climatologist Brian Brett Schneider told the Anchorage Daily News, "We are absolutely smashing, obliterating, September records." The average maximum daily temperature in September at the time of that report was 65.9 degrees Fahrenheit, more than 3 degrees warmer than the next closest September. On average, the typical average high temperature for the month of September there is 55 degrees Fahrenheit. High temperature records were set across the state that month, with Palmer, Kodiak, Seward, Kenai, Cordova, and Valdez all setting records. High temperature records continue to be set around the world on a regular basis, yet in the US, the impacts are clear. Late October saw another record-breaking heat wave hit Southern California, with Los Angeles hitting 102 degrees Fahrenheit. Denial and reality. In a recent interview, it's man-made. He also said the climate will change back again, whatever that means. Meanwhile, the ongoing denialism continues unabated in his administration. Climate change information was removed from an important planning document for a national park in New England, with the rationale that it was deemed a sensitive topic. The North Carolina government did not like the science about sea level rise, so literally passed a law banning policies based on such forecasts. The state, of course, is still recovering from flooding from Hurricane Florence. Meanwhile, Trump's EPA has abandoned restrictions against hydrofluorocarbons, a chemical that has been linked to climate change. OPEC announced it is predicting a massive increase in oil production over the next 5 years, enough so that it will offset CO2 reductions from electric cars. On that note, it was recently exposed that the state of Texas, already the leading emitter of greenhouse gases in the U.S., has approved 43 petrochemical projects along the Gulf Coast since 2012, projects that add millions of tons more of greenhouse gas pollution. Stunningly, despite the terrifying weather events and dire predictions of what's to come, it has come to light that the Trump administration is aware of and accepts a projected 7-degree rise in global temperatures by just 2100. This came out in a draft statement issued by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, which was written to justify Trump's decision to freeze federal fuel efficiency standards for cars and trucks built after 2020. The amazing thing they're saying is human activities are going to lead to this rise of carbon dioxide that is disastrous for the environment and society. Michael McCracken, who served as a senior scientist at the U.S. Global Change Research Program from 1993 to 2002, told The Washington Post. And then they're saying they're not going to do anything about it? The Trump administration's stance on climate change is essentially that we're doomed, so what's the point in cutting greenhouse gas emissions? With regard to the alarming UN climate report, the White House basically shrugged it off, claiming that emissions in the U.S. have dropped since 2005. This is a true statement, but does not explain the reason for that, which is a historic shift away from coal-fired electricity and toward renewables and natural gas. Fortunately, reality is striking back. A group of 17 bipartisan state governors representing states that comprise half of the total U.S. GDP has vowed to both fight climate change and fight Donald Trump on the issue. They recently pledged $1.4 billion to support electric cars and institute new policies geared toward reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Stunningly, even Bloomberg, a business news outlet, is running stories with titles like New Climate Debate, How to Adapt to the End of the World. And of course, the language coming out of the UN is a sign that the international community is beginning to understand the full weight of climate change's implication. Alas, this realization has not yet been met with the policy response it deserves. The author of a key UN report on the dangers of breaching the 1.5 degrees Celsius global warming limit recently said that the world is nowhere near on track to keep warming below even that already arbitrary level.